Hi everyone, Felix. Today I'm going to present our work DiGamma, domain-aware genetic algorithm for hardware mapping optimization for DNN accelerator. DNN applications are everywhere. To run DNN model more efficiently, many specialized DNN accelerators are designed. They are featuring high parallelism via thousands of PE and high utilization via variance of mapping strategy. Now let's take a look at what a DNN accelerator is made of. First, we will have PE array. In each PE, there could be 1 to several ALU or MAC unit. Second, we'll have hierarchy of buffer, for example, small local scratch pad beside each PE, and a shared global buffer and an off-chip DRAM. And we can define the buffer size at each level. Third, we need network on chip, NOC, to distribute and reduce the data. And these three basic components are the most higher order bit of hardware resources we need to configure in the DNN accelerator. And here we call them hardware design space. After designing the DNN hardware resources design space, the next key component is the mapping. For mapping, it includes tiling. Tiling is the ability to change bound of data tiles from one or more operands tensor per level of the buffer hierarchy. And the compute order is the ability to change the loop order iterates per tiling level. And loop parallelism, it means the ability to change which tensor dimensions are parallelized per tiling level. And then we have mapping shape. It's the ability to change the logical shape and clustering of the accelerator's hardware resources. And four of them formed a mapping design space. To quickly summarize, a DNN accelerator can be defined by its hardware resources assignment and its mapping strategy. In hardware resources part, we have number of PE, buffer, and NOCs. In the mapping part, we have tiling, ordering, parallelism, and shape. And all of them together forms a DNN accelerator configuration. And with the DNN model, we can evaluate its latency, energy, power, and area performance. So what is actually the challenge of figuring out a DNN accelerator design? This is a typical design flow of a DNN accelerator. At the start, we'll have the target DNN model. We will select a task and pick the state-of-the-art model for it. Then we will design its hardware resources, usually by heuristic. Then we will find the mapping strategy also by some expertise and heuristic. However, hardware mapping design often requires several to hundreds of iterations, which could take more than a year. Then finally, we'll have an optimized accelerator design. This design flow has some limitation. First, don't algorithm to product design time. And second, it includes massive engineering costs. And third, many of these decisions are based on some heuristic, which could lead to suboptimal performance. Therefore, recently, many works were proposed to automate the design process by applying different optimization algorithms for the design space exploration problem. Here we show a high-level comparison of state-of-the-art work on both hardware space and mapping space. At the start, you will see that some of the work that are mostly focusing on the hardware space, and some of the work you will see that they are mostly focusing on the mapping space. So we can observe that works are often working on either of them. It is good because of mapping design space is very, very huge at both of them. And when we explore both of them simultaneously, the search space just explodes. A recent work called Haskell tackled the co-exploration problem with a two-step approach. Essentially, it means it search for the hardware first, then search the mapping. In this work, DiGamma, we search them simultaneously. However, because of the exploding search space, we need to add some tricks. And these are what we are going to talk about in this talk. So before we go into the technical detail, let's see how we will evaluate the efficiency of the algorithm. Often we'll look at the algorithm's sample efficiency. It means the performance improvement over a number of samples. So the sample efficiency of a search algorithm is determined by two aspects. First, the efficiency of its representation on the design space, and the efficiency of the exploration step of the algorithm. So in the following, we will see how a mapping and hardware design space is pruned and described in DiGamma. Then we will discuss the exploration algorithm of it. Now let's take another look at this figure. Here we want to co-optimize the hardware mapping space together. It means that we now have control and can allocate the exact type of or amount of hardware resources we want to execute our optimal mapping in mind. For example, for tiling, we can actually ask for larger buffer if we really want to fit in larger tile size, and of course, trading off area and power. Therefore, for the buffer size in hardware space, we can directly infer from the tiling strategy in the mapping. Similarly, for the knock, we don't predefine any knock which might reduce the mapping choices. On the contrary, we let the mapping tell what kind of knock we want, and the different knock codes will reflect as area and power overhead. Following this rule, P becomes the additional hardware parameter we need to trigger on besides the four mapping knobs, tiling, ordering, parallelism, and shape. Now let's look at the representation of DiGamma. The entire series will infer an accelerator architecture point, which includes the hardware and mapping part. First of all, let me briefly introduce our notation. K and C means the output and input channel, and Y and X means the height and width of the input. R and S means the height and width of the weight. You can see that we have a 16-fold cross 16P array, and the tile size of each mapping dimension is shown here. And the ordering of the for loop of convolution is represented like this. And the parallelism dimension is noted here. And here we are showing a 2D parallelism with KC parallelized. This representation will infer an accelerator design point like this. For example, we have 64 cross 16P array, and we have KC parallelism. So they together will decide the knock assignment. And at each level of buffer hierarchy, the required size of buffer are automatically inferred by the tile sizes. Now the workload becomes, we have a workload, and then you ask DiGamma, and DiGamma will output an optimized accelerator configuration. Let's see another example. Now we have a different series. It represents different accelerator design as shown in the figure. It becomes 32 cross 32P array, YX parallelism as noted by here, and different buffer sizes of L1 and L2 are allocated. So now we have already discussed our representation. Next, let's talk about the algorithm design. DiGamma uses a GA-based algorithm. In a GA-based algorithm, you will have evolution part and evaluation part. In each part, you will have some operator, and we'll talk about them later. At the start, you will initialize a population. A population is made of several individuals. So each individual is actually the representation that we have just discussed. The representation is made of several genes. So you will put this population into your evolution loop. And then you will use some genetic operator like crossover and mutation to perturb their genes. And you will select some good one as the parent of the next generation. And the loops goes on until the algorithm converge. Here is how we use it in DiGamma. At the evolution part, we didn't use some standard genetic operator. Instead, we use some domain-aware genetic operator, and we will discuss them later. At the evaluation part, each of the representation or individual will be decoded into an accelerator design, and this accelerator design will be put into our fitness function. In the fitness function, we have a hardware performance evaluator called Mastro, and we will score them based on their fitness, and then loops goes on. Now let's look at some genetic operator we use. First of all, crossover. It changes the gene of dad and mom and generates some good son and daughter. And then we have mutation, which essentially perturbs some of the tile sizes or parallelism dimension. And reorder essentially reorder the compute order of the convolution. However, there are some details that we didn't talk about here, is that We didn't just randomly reorder them or randomly just mutate them. But instead, what we use is that we actually structure how we reorder and how we explore the step so that we can more efficiently, more structurally to explore the design space better. So if you want to know the details, please look at the paper. Also, beside those genetic operators, we also have some very specialized operator like growing, which is essentially to explore some different parallelism level, like we have 1D parallelism to 2D parallelism and to 3D parallelism. And if you have growing, you also have aging to age your individual from 3D parallelism to 2D to 1D. Here is a summary of the trick that we have used. At the representation side, we properly correlate dependent knobs to reduce the search space. And next, we propose a concise presentation of the map space with a short series of values. And next, another feature we did not show in detail is that this representation can actually infer a one-to-one mapping to the hardware cost model we use, Maestro. At the algorithm side, we talk about several operators and the exploration step of each operator are specifically designed for the design space exploration problem, so that they are not randomly exploring, but they are explored in a structured manner. Now let's look at our evaluation. For the setup, we compare on 7D model, and the resource constraint, we use total chip area. For the sampling budget of the algorithm, we use 40K data point. But the objective is to minimize the latency. Here we have three groups of comparison. The first group, we call it hardware opt. It means that we fix the mapping, but optimize the hardware part, and we optimize it by a grid search. For the fixed mapping, we use like NVIDIA-like mapping, Shinra-like mapping, and Iris-like mapping. Another category we call it mapping opt. Essentially, we fix the hardware side and optimize the mapping. And how we optimize mapping is by using the tool DiGamma. DiGamma is just a mapping design tool based on a fixed mapping. So for the fixed hardware configuration, we just use three heuristic hardware assignment. Here we just call them hardware A, B, C configuration. And then finally, we have hardware mapping optimization is essentially DiGamma. Now let's look at the result. Here we are showing a normalized latency performance, so it is the lower the better. So in the group of hardware opt, we find that optimized hardware, which is grid search hardware plus a fixed mapping strategy, DLA, will achieve the best performance across three different configurations. Then we explore mapping opt. We can see that one of the configuration of the fixed hardware plus an optimized mapping search strategy could achieve the best performance here in the mapping opt group. And this grid search hardware plus DLA like the best in the hardware opt, and the hardware C plus gamma the best performance in the mapping opt. Both of them have good performance, but like the constraint of them is that they require manual tune configuration. And now we have hardware map co-opt, which is DiGamma. So DiGamma achieved 1.25 to around 100 better performance than others, while no manual tune configuration are actually needed. Here's our conclusion. In DiGamma, we reduce accelerator design time for both hardware and mapping. So to search for the hardware plus mapping configuration, it can be completed within 30 minutes. And then we reduce engineering effort by abstracting the design process. Now any non-domain expert engineer can play with the tool and search for the optimal hardware configuration. And then we can achieve better performance. We have shown that by co-optimizing hardware mapping, we can achieve 1.2 to 100 times better latency performance comparing to others. So if you have any questions, please contact me with my email. And also, if you are interested, please check in our code base. Thank you.